Hi everybody, this is James Tompkins and welcome to the first lecture of Advanced Corporate Finance. So what I want to do, like I've done with my other series, both the Corporate Finance series as well as the International Finance series, is essentially introduce myself. Why? Because sometimes people like to know who's talking to them, if you will, and also the big picture of this class. So let me start off with introducing myself, a little bit about my background. I always start off by saying I am an American. I was born in the United States, but when I was 5, I moved to Europe, and I grew up in Belgium and England, and didn't come back to back to the States until university age. I began at a place called Kings Point, which most people have not heard of, but they have heard of West Point, right? West Point is like a federal academy for the Army, and Kings Point is also one of the 5 federal academies, but for the Merchant Marine. And what's Merchant Marine? Well, what does a merchant do? A merchant buys and sells stuff, right? And Marine, you maybe associate that with big tough guys. No, that wasn't me. Marine associated with water, so Merchant Marine, basically ships, cargo ships. And that's what I did in my 20s. Basically worked, or most of my 20s, basically worked on cargo ships, tankers, container ships, went all over the world, etc., etc. And I had the privilege during one of my vacations, because back then I had about 5 or 6 months of vacation, is I worked at Texas A&M. They asked me to teach a class there, or a couple classes, and I found out, hey, I really like teaching. And so that's why today I'm in academia. Then I went to Wharton, got an MBA, majored in finance, and then I thought I'd try the real world for a little bit before I got into academia, and worked for FMC. And I'm guessing you probably have not heard of FMC because they don't sell at the retail level, they sell to other businesses, but they're actually multinational, product. They're a conglomerate. They make the Bradley fighting vehicle, for example, so defense stuff. They make machinery that makes orange juice and agricultural chemicals. So they're really all over the place with respect to their products. And every now and again, when it's relevant, I'll bring up maybe parts of my background or experiences as it relates to this class. And I'm happily married, and I have 2 teenagers, and I work for Kennesaw State University. I've been working there for about 20 years now. A great place to work. So, to work, also a great place to go to business college. We just recently ranked, I think, number 38 nationally for MBA programs. And in-state, we beat out UGA. Sorry, UGA. And GT, number 1 ranked of public institutions for MBA. Anyway, that's a little bit about myself. And what I want to get into now is my approach to teaching. Now, first of all, my experience is that students, they don't want a bunch of theory thrown at them just for the sake of theory, right? They want to know, hey, how can you bridge this with practice? And so that's my approach, theory followed by practice. Trying to do practice first is like trying to learn how to run a marathon before you can walk. So it makes sense to do the theory first and then to use what you learn in theory and bridge it with practice. Now, my teaching style is I could not care less about your ability to memorize stuff. Okay? My goal is to maximize your understanding. Okay? And so I'm very Socratic in my teaching. So for example, if you ask me a question, do you think I would answer you? And you'll probably think, oh yeah, of course. That's what you're paid to do, right? And actually, no, I wouldn't. I would then ask you a question. And then maybe you might ask me a question. But my goal would be to logically sort of facilitate a series of back and forth where in the end, you answer your own question. And to me, that's a higher order of learning. Otherwise, if I just answer your question, that makes me an information provider, not a teacher. And my goal is to teach you and therefore maximize your understanding. And so even when you're watching these things online or whatever, I'll often ask questions. If you need to hit the pause and think about it, go, hit the pause, because maybe my pauses are not long enough or whatever. If you're in my class, it's a very interactive class. There's no such thing as a dumb question. In fact, questions help out 3 people. Number 1, they help you out because in the end, you'll get your question answered through you answering it yourself. Number 2, I kind of think of teaching as, I use this analogy. An archer. How does an archer know that he or she made a good shot? Well, you see if the arrow hit the bullseye, right? And your questions are a way of helping me know if I've hit the bullseye or not. And so you're helping me out if you ask a question. And then finally, if you have a question, chances are others also have the same question. And so you're basically helping everybody else out. So I strongly encourage questions. So that's a little bit about myself. And what I want to get into now is the course, the big picture of the class. So there on the screen, you see a representation of the firm, okay? And I'm going to start off by, it's so embarrassing. What does finance mean? Well, has anyone bought a new car lately, or even a used car? And how did you pay for it? Maybe you financed it? And so finance basically means to raise money. And so in the context of what you see right here, which is a representation of the firm, what 2 big picture decisions do you see? Well, number 1, there's what I call the asset investment decision, and that's what a company spends its money on. Textbooks refer to this as capital budgeting. I've always called it the asset investment decision because in a direct sense, that's what you're doing. You're spending money and they create assets. In the context of finance, okay, not accounting, but in the context of finance, what if you hire a new CEO? Is that an asset investment decision? Well, is that something you'd spend money on? It is, right? And therefore it makes it an asset investment decision. Now, of course, in accounting, you won't see a CEO right here, but from a finance perspective, can the right CEO make a huge difference to value creation? Or for that matter, the wrong CEO to value destruction? It can, right? And so basically, some would argue that the asset investment decision is the most important decision a firm makes. So for example, when Apple decided, what? We're going to completely reinvent how people buy their music. No longer are they going to be confined to buying the whole CD or the whole album or whatever. They're going to be able to buy one song again. And we have no idea if this will work, if this will take off or whatever, but we'll develop iTunes and we'll take a risk. Now, did Apple have to spend a bunch of money to get that up and running? They did, right? I mean, they had to hire R&D folks and maybe designers and software engineers, and they had to go out and make contracts with people who created the content, and so that was an asset investment decision. And when you think about what Apple has done in the long run, would you say its stock price is a reflection primarily of the asset investment decision, i.e. its business plan, or other decisions? Probably its asset investment decision. In any case, what other big picture decisions you see as you look at the screen? And we've already covered this side, so what else is to look at? Well, there's this side, right? And that's what's known as the financing decision, or maybe the capital structure decision. So let me ask you this. Is the financing decision about, I wonder if I'll raise money or not? It's not, right? Because if you're going to spend money on something, do you have to raise money? You do, right? There's no choice. Okay, so raising money is not a choice, right? So the financing decision or the capital structure decision is actually given that we need to raise money to spend it on our business plan. Okay, what will the structure of that money look like? So for example, for the same asset, could I have nothing in debt and 1,000 in equity? I could, right? Or could I have 400 in debt and 600 in equity? I could, right? Could I have 800 in debt and 200 in equity? I could, right? So in other words, these two decisions are separable. And so does it seem intuitive to you that there exists, if you will, an optimal capital structure that would, if you will, maximize firm value? And if it does, well then that's what the financing decision is about. Okay, I'll get more detailed in a minute. So as far as this class is concerned, I call it Advanced Corporate Finance. I think of it as part 2 of corporate finance. And that's because corporate finance, as we'll see, I'll summarize that, is really about the asset investment decision, whereas advanced corporate is about the financing decision. And so maybe to make this part 2, the advanced corporate finance, make a little bit more sense, what I'll do is I'll begin with the highlights of corporate finance. And if you want to do this in depth, my corporate finance series is available on YouTube, and it's just called Corporate Finance. Lecture 1 through 6. I think it's 6 lectures. And so this is really just a quick snapshot. So in corporate finance, my theme was, all right, my goal is to look at financial principles as it affects firm value. And so if you're going to manage value, does it help to be able to measure value? It does, right? I always use the diet and scale analogy. If you're on a diet, what's a really good instrument to have to know if your diet's working or not? Scale, right? Helps you figure out whether you're gaining weight or losing weight, etc., etc. So the very first topic in corporate finance was measuring value. Now, do you remember the name of a model that you learned for measuring value? You want a clue? Oh my, look at the time. Time value money, right? So in the time value money model, what 2 things did you need to value anything? You remember? Well, basically cash flows and a discount rate. And let me show you why. For example, let's say the discount rate is 10%. Then what would today's value be of this 110? So in other words, you're expecting to get $110 at time 1. The discount rate that applies to this $110 is 10%. And so what is the equivalent of what it's worth at time 0? Well, I have cash flows and a discount rate. With time value money, you'd get 100. Okay, so I'm not reteaching time value money. Like I said, if you want to do that in depth, I think it's lecture 2 of the corporate finance series. But the point here is to value anything, what 2 items did I need? Cash flows and a discount rate. And so the next thing that we did, and the next 2 could be in different orders, it doesn't matter. But that is valuing the asset investment decision, or also known as capital budgeting. And I didn't magically change how you measured value. We applied the time value money model. And if you did this, what in theory, at least with respect to what you quantified, had to be true for an asset investment decision to create value? Do you remember? Positive net present value, right? So for example, if a company spent $1,000 today on an asset, maybe this is my lemonade stand, okay, asset investment decision. And because of that asset investment decision, that lemonade stand, I expect to get $1,200 in a year, not guaranteed, but expect, okay, and then that's the end of the lemonade stand, okay. If the discount rate that applied to the riskiness inherent in these cash flows were 10%, then my net present value would be about $91. So in theory, the value of the announcement of, hey, I'm going to spend money, or I'm spending money now on this lemonade stand today, if all of these numbers were credible, the 1,200 and the 10%, then the value of my firm, my lemonade stand firm, would go up by $91. So if there was stock out there that was tracking the value of my firm, it would go up by $91. Okay? So again, though, what 2 things did I need to value, again, what is arguably the most important decision a firm makes? and that is the asset investment decision. What two things did I need? Well, I needed cash flows and a discount rate, right? Except for now, at this point, we assumed that we knew what the discount rate was. It just provided for us. So obviously that's a big assumption, right? So later on in the class, we figured out how to get this discount rate. But for now, we went through the theory and the practice of the relevant cash flows. Then we went, and again, these two topics could have been in reverse order. Then we went to this side of the balance sheet. And we said, for example, why is debt worth 400? Why is equity worth 600? And guess what model we applied? Well, time value money model, right? Again, what two things did you need to value anything? Cash flows and a discount rate. Okay, so we simply applied the time value money model to various financial securities, such as debt and equity. But again, for now, we assumed that we knew half of the relevant information. We assumed that we were just given the discount rate for financial securities on a silver platter. And so the next topic, therefore, was, well, how do we get the discount rate for financial securities? And the primary reason that we got into the depth that we got into with that was because of the next topic, and that is the discount rate for the asset investment decision. It turns out that this guy is highly related to that guy. In other words, you cannot understand the discount rate for the asset investment decision without understanding the discount rate for financial securities. And why did we need this guy? Well, if you recall, when we valued my lemonade stand, we needed cash flows and a discount rate, right? And we assumed that we knew the discount rate for the asset investment decision. Okay, so we basically come full circle by the end of this class, and we understand the elements that go into the discount rate for the asset investment decision. And in that class, we got into the kind of depth that we needed to be able to reasonably bridge theory with practice. So basically, corporate finance deals with the asset investment decision, the theory and practice. Of course, online, I'm just getting into theory. Practice, I do in class with cases, etc. But corporate finance dealt with the asset investment decision. So that's, if you will, what I think of as part one of corporate finance. Now, part two, what we call advanced corporate finance, basically deals with the right-hand side of the balance sheet. In other words, which is also, by the way, a very important decision. Why? Because you can make great decisions on this side, but you can undo those great decisions on this side by making awful decisions on the right-hand side. So this is also a very important decision, the financing decision. And so that's primarily what we're going to focus on in this class. It includes both capital structure as well as dividend policy. And the second lecture in this series, Sustainable Growth Rate, highlights why dividend policy is relevant to capital structure. And so that they're all related as to the right-hand side of the balance sheet. In fact, I'll ask you very quickly right now, when a firm makes profits or net income, what are the only two things that it can do with those profits? Well, it can either keep it, right, which we call what? Retained earnings, or pay it out in dividends. Now, if the firm keeps it, well, who does that money belong to? Does it belong to the debt holders or the equity holders? It belongs to the equity holders, right? Because the debt holders have already been paid their interest. And so basically, if dividend policy impacts how much a firm keeps and therefore impacts the amount of firm's equity, is that related to the capital structure decision? It is, right? And so the very first topic that we'll get into, it's sort of an introductory topic, it's the sustainable growth rate. And what that's going to do is it's going to look at, from an accounting or mechanical sense, how these three decisions are all interrelated. The decision to grow, which you could argue is an asset investment decision, capital structure, and dividend policy. And so this is what I'm going to be showing online. Now, if you're in my class, then we're also going to get into other special topics. but I'm going to do these through cases, and they're going to include mergers and acquisitions, corporate governance and ethics, and risk management. In fact, the corporate governance and ethics, I'll focus on Enron. I'll draw my expert witness corporate governance experience that I was for an Enron lawsuit, and then we'll also have guest speakers and so on and so forth, or at least a guest speaker. That's the plan. So in this class, there's a heavy emphasis on practice. In fact, there are only 5, if you will, theory or lecture classes, and everything else is going to be focusing on practice, either through cases or group projects or guest speaker. In any case, I hope that you join me for the remaining lectures in this series, and as always, I hope that it will be a great learning experience. Thank you. Bye-bye.